Welcome back to Mute Manifesto Frozen Rhizome. Today I have D on. D, can you introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, my name's D. I'm a DJ, sound tech, and a community organizer here in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Yeah, for sure. So the topic I want to cover today with and within the scope of Frozen Rhizome is essentially sound and activism, the intersection of those two things, specifically in this moment of occupation and purported, drawdown, but also just generally in terms of leftist organizing on the ground in Minneapolis in a broader sense. So I guess just to start, D, how are you feeling right now about the occupation and about the supposed drawdown and everything? How are you feeling about it all?
It's been tough because I'm sure a lot of other folks around here can sympathize that, in Minneapolis proper, things have somewhat changed. I wouldn't necessarily call it like a drawdown. I think ICE and the state, they've been more dubious about the way that they've been doing things. They've been more covert, more targeted, and it's really been hard for folks that maybe are more used to the more kind of in your face kind of stuff that you've been seeing on the internet for the past couple months. Hasn't been a whole lot of that right now. We know that there's been a lot of activity over at the Whipple. We know that, people are still being abducted. Legal observers are still being targeted. But there has been a change. We also know that ICE has been moving their abduction activity out to the suburbs. And I've actually been communicating with some folks out in Mankato recently who have been seeing an uptick in their ICE activity over there. And, I know it's, from their point of view, it's been going on this entire time. So it hasn't really stopped for them, but it's just have increased. Probably in retrospect to the decrease that we've seen over here. On a personal level, I've been just just trying to work on regulating myself. I feel like a lot of folks we've been put in situations where we've had to put ourselves at risk, and we've had to put ourselves out there and spend what money we have on community care and community defense and just kind of burn out on both ends. I've been working throughout this entire thing too. So, my day job is I'm a therapist, and it's been tough trying to kind of manage, both things.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like especially in care industries, it becomes difficult, extra taxing to apply that care to your community, and have your nervous system disrupted not only by your job but also by the community defense that you engage in as well.
I mean, in the industry that I work in, they've been, the moral basis for why they came here was to target what the MAGA death cult perceives to be fraud here in Minnesota, and been fraud in home health care services and mental health services, social services. That was a target, and they started impeding our income back in October, November. They were doing things trying to freeze funding and stuff sent to the state of Minnesota, the federal funds that they use to pay out services. And we were seeing places that weren't able to bill for the services that they had provided to folks. And there was definitely a time a couple months ago where this is something that's not really talked about, but there are people that needed services and companies that needed to bill for those services, and then they couldn't bill for them. There were some companies that were like releasing some of the folks that they were servicing from their roles. So what that means is there are people that just didn't receive critical services at times, and there are people that died here because of that, and it's still going on. I know that our billing timelines have like changed. So like now we're only able to bill like once a month, where we're able to bill like I think twice a month before or something like that, and send it in to get paid. So it's been hard. I feel like it's been a full frontal attack on me, just being a black person in Minneapolis, and also in my work as well as a care worker.
Yeah, beyond the like mask of like the very very viral like executions and attacks and brutality that seems to be criminalizing care on the streets, there's also a deep attack on like any kind of public care, and just kind of a continuation of the kind of shock doctrine, breaking up of any kind of social infrastructure that is fundamental to any kind of leftist policy that is historically relatively strong in Minneapolis, even though it does have blind spots as well. Yeah, so that definitely makes sense. And also to address like the more strategic sort of like pulling back from the center now. It's like you start with the strike in the middle, strike at the most fiery kind of shocking center, and then you tendril out from there in a way that is much less visible and much less easy to organize against in a grassroots way, in part because it is so targeted and so stealthy. Yeah, so we're kind of in this moment of that, the aftershocks, right? The after, how do you recover and continue to take a breath while also trying to meet the changing needs of the resistance here, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of call outs for mutual aid help for folks here in Minneapolis. I mean, we just lapsed a month, the month of February, and we're going to be approaching the month of March. And I know that there's going to be calls to action and tenant organizing and anything from, I mean, I know there's one org that claims that, if they can get 10,000 folks to sign on to a rent strike and stuff, that they might be able to pull that off. I know that there are other orgs that are just advocating for like escalating actions, leading up to March 1st, in solidarity with, our neighbors that have been under duress and abject cruelty, like during what's been going on here. And it's been since December, early December, since people have been going through this. And I know that there are people that maybe has something to give, early on, and maybe they're in a place right now it's hard to give, all the way through here. So we're trying to figure out ways to make this more sustainable and to kind of bear the brunt of the fact that the state hasn't done anything for these folks yet. They're all they're doing is going on these media tours and claiming that they want people to come here and spend money and, Amy Klobuchar saying that they want people to come and stay at our hotels and shit in the summer. And I'm like, man, we got a lot of suffering to do before we get to the summer around here. This shit definitely isn't over. Not from my point of view, anyway.
Oh yeah, a lot of suffering, a lot of grieving. I mean, but also, it is a potentially revolutionary moment in the sense of it, like, just continuing to point out how abandoned we are as the people by any kind of, like, even progressive, quote unquote, liberal governance that has established itself as the consensus in Minneapolis. And so, like, it is potentially revolutionary in the sense that it gives us an opportunity to continue to understand and spread the awareness of the fact that it's all about us and coming from us. And that's kind of been the primary, a kind of anarchist grassroots resistance has been the only fibrous response to this. I feel like the only response with actual teeth and with actual ability to care for those who need it most.
Yeah, and I think there are people that are participating in the anarchist tendency right now that might not even really understand. I mean, they're using this language,
Absolutely.
you know, like mutual aid, community defense, you know, community care, and I think people are kind of waking up to the fact that this tendency isn't necessarily something that is all about tearing something down, you know, all about burning something down, or that I think there's a spirit here that like people are like building like a world that they want to live in, and very similar to the insurgency during the George Floyd rebellion, and you know, having lived through that and like have been was really active like during that movement. I'm seeing a lot of the same people that I met, you know, during that movement, you know, very active in this movement. People that are kind of bearing some of the differences that they may have had, you know, after that movement and after the repression and you know, counterinsurgency that we all kind of endured after that. And starting to see, you know, in my community, I'm starting to see people, like good people, get together and try to, you know, formalize around some kind of orgs or just some kind of sustained kind of action that may not have happened before if it wasn't for, you know, that all the cruelty and stuff that we've had to endure here as well. I think that's an important part of this movement, and I think there are long-term goals to build some kind of bulwark of defense here, with the expectation that like the midterms coming in the fall not going to be too good to us here. You know, we're all seeing these reports of ICE, you know, being deployed near polling places and near places where people go to like receive care, like during this, like hospitals or you know, places like places where people are going to receive like welfare aid or even like
or like even like food shelves,
right? You know, and I'm just I think that is kind of what we're trying to build towards, to be able to defend people that are just trying to live, trying to survive this.
I mean, so you mentioned that like George Floyd uprising fed your own ability to engage with the stuff, and also kind of seeded the ground for a lot of like activist muscle that Minneapolis has had now. But your political education precedes that as well, and so I'd like to just take some time to go over how you became a politically aware subject. All this is going to be building to these interesting moments of the experience of sound in resistance movements, whether it's celebratory or on the streets, like in active protest. But to get there, I want to lay the foundation of how you yourself came to be someone who understood themselves as a political subject.
Well, I've always had an interest in music. Even when I was a young person, I like to like use like pirate radio through like Winamp, and you know, I'd turn on the like visualizer and just kind of tune out to like whatever channel and stuff I could find at the time. I got hip to like pirating like music and stuff really early on, and also like you know, streaming before kind of streaming kind of became like just how it is now with Netflix and shit. Yeah, I was an internet kid for sure, and I had a, hi-fi that my grandparents and stuff didn't want anymore, and So I, turn on Hot 97.3 and turn it up in my room and just kind of vibe out. And um, I grew up in Ohio. Grew up in a small town. I grew up in a very like working class, family and stuff. I didn't really have a whole lot growing up. A blended family. And I left Ohio in 2009, moved to Duluth. Um, and I did well enough in high school that I could like get some scholarships and grants and stuff to go to a college over there. I like to tell a story that like my dad was like in the army, and well, it was my stepdad, but he was in the army and guarded missiles and stuff in Germany, so he claims, um, and I proposed that I was gonna like go in the army or kind of late in school because I don't even know what I wanted to do, and it was like, well, you got good grades in school, like why don't you like come over here to Minnesota, and because he'd moved out here and come out here to Minnesota and try to go to school, and I did that. So that's he was my connection to like out here. So I initially lived in Duluth, and there I like had met some people in the dorms that were like in these clubs and stuff, and one of my best friends and stuff. Shout out to Nate Dixon. He put me on this club called Kaleidoscope Multicultural Club. We'd meet in this room called like the Center for Just Living, and so we got to like communicate with like folks that were kind of interested in like critical theory, folks that were interested in kind of like geopolitics and kind of eco like ideas. I think there was a group called Earth Action at the time. I got really involved in this group called Volunteers Involved Through Action. So I just really liked what they were doing. They were going out to like halfway houses in the Catholic worker community over there, and we were feeding folks on Fridays, and I was like led in that, like people that I really like to be around and stuff for doing that. And then when they graduated, I kind of like took over. And it was through Catholic Worker that I learned about the School of the Americas protest. I was invited. Shout out to Jay Newcomb. He was a coordinator at the Center for Just Living. He had invited myself and a few other folks and stuff to come out to this protest out in, at the time it was Fort Benning, Georgia. I think it's going by something else now. To protest this government program. To me it was like I was really into like kind of like I was smoking weed at the time. I was really into like conspiracy theories and stuff. So like what is this like School of the Americas about? And so what's the School of the Assassins? And I got there and like
yeah,
and like we it was the first day was like this like vigil kind of thing, like people were
well, can you just pull back for just a second and explain like what the School of Americas is, or was?
I mean, because the first time I went, I mean, I didn't know what was going on until like I got there. Like I didn't.
You're just okay. So you're just getting you're just like getting high with your Center for Just Living people, and they were like, okay, we're gonna go to this protest.
Yeah, I mean, I and like that was initially kind of the thing. It was like there's some cool people that like I knew had like good values, and I really enjoyed being around. And then it was like I got my education when I got out there, because it was the first night after kind of just spending some time at the gates and stuff and seeing all the different pop-ups of different groups and stuff that were chopping it up about whatever they're advocating for and protesting. There was these like caucuses that you would go to at night. They had these like educational classes, and so like at the time I was like studying journalism, so I was like there with a notepad and just taking a bunch of notes, and because I wanted to know about this stuff. I want to know about like I wanted the beat, and I wanted to write about this. And one of the first ones that I went to, it was this agricultural organizer out of Honduras. I can't remember the name of the man now. This detail is gonna be important later because I found out some stuff that happened to him after. But he was just talking about the work there that they were doing. They're trying to organize, agricultural workers. I'd come from a community where there's a lot of like migrant workers and stuff in our community, and I had felt that those were kind of folks in our community that were just like really like downtrodden. They just didn't really like really go out. You don't really see them a whole lot. You just kind of saw them working, and I thought it was like really cool that he was like advocating for like their dignity, and they had like all these plans on like what they were going to do with their movement, and they've been thinking about kind of like moving towards politics and stuff. And if he was a really like persuasive and like charismatic speaker, and and then like I went to this protest the following year, and I found out that he was murdered. He was martyred over there, and so like that
Yeah.
it kind of culminated in that. But like that was an experience that I had where I got to see this man speak. I went to another one on like Killer Coke. It's this group that like studies Coke, they just focus on Coke. They look, what is Coke doing in all these different countries and stuff. And
we're talking about the brand,
yep,
right?
yeah, we're talking about like Coke, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, like the red, soft drink that folks are pretty well adjusted to drinking. It's they do terrible stuff and stuff out in these like global South countries and stuff. They're talking about like famine in like Burma. They're talking about people that didn't have access to like water, supplies because Coke Industries had like tainted like their water. They're talking about like working conditions that children were like suffering in like sugar beet fields and stuff. And like I really like, this was like a lot of information for someone that was like just coming from like a small town. At the time it was like it felt like I was like learning a lot about like, I didn't even know what imperialism was and stuff, or like colonialism or anything until I like went on this trip. And it really kind of like changed the trajectory of like what I was like studying and stuff in college. And I left there that day wanting to be more like these organizers and stuff that I had seen speak at these caucuses. And my favorite one was it was like an organizer training. So it was like we had learned like Paulo Freire's like Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and kind of like some of the models and stuff that he like presented in that work. We learned
which was kind of about like itself, which is kind of about like a deconstruction of consensus education, right? Like the standard education that we have.
Yeah, it was more about like constructivism, like the idea that like you can build knowledge about something, in a classroom in discussion, as opposed to like having one person getting the download from the one person that's like, right, I have all the information, here you go. It's like, I'm going to deposit this information in your
which
bank
is kind
account.
of how which is kind of how you were actually getting into activism and understanding like America's place in the world and everything to begin with, right? It's like in person, like in these interactions, these caucuses.
Yeah, and like it was all like discussion based and stuff. They encouraged you to like ask questions, and like these people are really skilled at like facilitating these spaces too. So like you just felt like really engaged, like in that was like my first experience of like direct democracy and stuff, and like and like we like, voted on stuff while we were in there, and this was during a night, it was just a night in Columbus, Georgia, and I pursued going to this protest for 2 more years following that. And I became like a coordinator for it. Like I would like talk it up at the school and try to get other folks interested in going to this and stuff, because it was really powerful, impactful for me, and like I wanted other people to experience that. And I think that for me was kind of what started a lot of it. the stuff that I was doing in Duluth, was really just inspired by some of the. Um, I went to San Francisco and stuff for a summer and stayed with some folks that were doing Food Not Bombs work as well. And so like I lived in like a small little co-op, and we were, preparing food that we'd either like dumpster dive for, or we'd got through other means like donations and stuff, and we were feeding like hundreds of folks at a time in San Francisco in 2012, 2013. And and then later, um, later I graduated college, and I started working in uh, I started working in like mental health, like working with folks that had experienced like trauma. Um, and I tried to use like critical pedagogy, like through working with people that had, with young people that had, uh, things happen to them and stuff, and they're like people that maybe live in the foster care system, um, I had like done that for like 3 years after college as well. Um, so throughout all that, had been like listening to like a lot of music, of course, and that was kind of always like my kind of like coping thing. And I'd gone dancing to like a lot of events and stuff too. And um, but I think like the inspiration for like what later became kind of like the people sound and stuff, for me it was a confluence of like some of the community organizing stuff I was doing in college, and that later kind of like continued to do when I left college, and just my love and passion for music, and just
Yeah.
it's both of those things.
Do you think that there is like, would you mind for the listeners like talking a little bit about what School of the Americas was? Um, and like I'm wondering if there's like connections to both the George Floyd and ICE escalation moments that you think are worth like tracing out explicitly.
So the School of the Americas, it's a government funded program. So uh, what we do, and what we have done since um, the 70s, is that we've received um, uh, soldiers from countries all over the global south, countries like Colombia, Honduras, El Salvador, um, uh, Argentina, Venezuela, ones that are often talked about like right now, Mexico. And we've trained them in um, acts of like warfare. They've been trained by like um, you know CIA folks and stuff. They've been trained by folks that specialize in psychological warfare. They've been trained by I mean, I think this is like a 3-4 year program and stuff that they go through to even just kind of be released. So they go through this program. Traditionally had been over at Fort Benning, Georgia, and the goal is to influence these other countries from like the inside. So these people have been responsible for some of the most like horrendous like acts of warfare that you can possibly even think of. People that have massacred thousands, disappeared, you know, uh, any kind of insurgent, movement. These are the people they kind of call into these contras to do the work, but from the inside. There's a very famous case of a priest, a Jesuit priest in El Salvador. He tried to provide a sanctuary and shelter for people that were under attack and stuff by like these contras, and he had like a radio broadcast that he would like try to communicate like who had been like disappeared, or like what the things that have kind of happened in the community, trying to not just trying to expose what was happening, but try to just kind of state the, this is the news, this is what's going on in our community. We don't have any other way to tell people that their child might not be coming home and stuff because
no, I mean also just like those records and those like documentations of moments when people are being disappeared are like super historically important,
and
okay.
Yeah, and that he was assassinated, and it really, like, his murder kind of like catalyzed like the movement and stuff. So there was a group called the SOA Watch. The SOA Watch organizes the School of the Americas protests. They have for pretty close to around probably 35 years now. And they have been like a faith-based group that has been kind of watching this activity and stuff for a long time now. This is a group that advocates for anti-imperialism and anti-colonialism, and like not just here in like the Americas and stuff, but elsewhere. They're kind of one of the, in my estimation, one of the oldest groups and stuff that really have been kind of paying attention to like what the United States is doing for the sake of democracy in like other countries. They're very good at educating. I'm here 35 years old, and I'm still talking about stuff that happened when I was like in my early 20s and stuff, and it definitely impacted me. So shout out to the SLA Watch. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, this word watch and stuff, because we have what's called an ice watch. So we're like ice watching like right now. We're reporting on their like behavior, or what they're doing in like these, in Minneapolis and small towns. We have a list of names of ICE officers. The SOA has a list of graduates of this program, and they've tracked them and followed them, and they know things that they have done in like these other countries and stuff. They've been reporting on like their these graduates and stuff behavior, these assassins, and I think the parallels are pretty good. Like
yeah, I mean, again, it's just this thing about like having a record, right? Like documenting these things is like super important. Archiving these things. Obviously, it's like a thing that they are using against us, and I think for that reason, it is equally important strategically to reverse that. It allows us to engage across time as opposed to just in the moment. I mean, and I think this watch thing is interesting too. I got involved in the GFS and the George Floyd uprising through cop watching, like, which was another like hyper-local signal chat, and in person, kind of just witnessing and documentation of things. And I feel like that's an interesting blueprint that we've seen across different instances of state brutality and like the responses to that. After your experiences there, when you moved to Minneapolis, you also got involved with the George Floyd uprising, correct? And that's was the birthplace of the People's Sound.
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite a few movements and stuff that kind of happened before then. Like I know that during the while I was kind of going to the SLA protests and stuff, it was in the context of also like the Occupy movement. Here in Minneapolis and stuff, there was a pretty like prevalent movement for Jamar Clark and stuff, who was murdered by the police here. Philando Castile, and you know, George Floyd. There are other folks and stuff that have been murdered since George Floyd. There was like Dante Wright and somebody to name really. In the context of the George Floyd movement, I was living, I would say probably around 4 blocks and stuff from what is now like the square. I had been at the time I'd been in South Minneapolis for like 3 years, from moving from Duluth, and I during the pandemic and stuff I was like living alone, and you know, of course, you know, like my social interactions were, I mean, I was a teacher, so I was like working with folks in the schools. I had just recently got my master's degree like the year before. It was like my first or second year teaching when the pandemic happened, and it was a really kind of this isolating time in my life. And so I was like living alone and doing distance learning, and so when you know, we were all kind of suffering through that, and when that video had like popped up, you know, my friend from Duluth, he messaged it to me, and you know, with the text, it said like, "This hurts," and I like looked at it, and you know, I had to realize that like, you know, I had like left the house the day before to go looking for like barbecue like food somewhere, you know, just to like get the hell out of the house, and you know, I'd realized that I was like on that block, not at the same time that it happened, but maybe like probably several hours and stuff before it happened. So in my mind, it was like, holy shit, like this man who just had you know, a cop like knee on his neck for like, you know, 8 minutes and 46 seconds and stuff, like that could be me, you know, that could have been me, you know, in that situation, like, you know, like given the right kind of you know, chain of events, and you know, people turned out right away. You know, I remember like it was literally like the day after they hosted a vigil protest, and it started at the square, well, 30th in Chicago at the time, and then we marched all the way down Hiawatha to the 3rd precinct, and some of the very first like skirmishes and stuff with the police for like that night, you know, like I had this feeling, because it was later that evening when that vigil happened, and like I had this feeling when I was out there, I was like, man, like if I stay longer, like shit's gonna go down, like the cops are already kind of like staging and stuff here, and like at the time, like, you know, I'm not gonna lie to you, I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to like be like, you know, staring down the police with like an, you know, full on like, you know, max tack kind of gear, and like, you know, ready to billy club us and stuff, like I like went back to my apartment, and that's kind of, for me, it was like that's kind of when the streamer stuff started, because I mean I hadn't been following Unicorn Riot and stuff until until the, you know, shit popped off, and as I started following Nico with Unicorn Riot, and he was like on the ground kind of showing everything that was going on over at the 3rd precinct, and
yeah, Unicorn Riot is like an on the ground, like kind of grassroots reporting organization, for those who don't know.
Yeah, and super dope streamer. You know, they've been doing that for a while, even before then, and I felt at the time when that was going on, you know, it's like, you know, I really appreciate what, you know, burning the 3rd precinct Clark did for our community, the rage and the action, you know, it's It's direct action to the highest degree. But like I felt really called to what was going on over at the square. Um, the ideation for some stuff I did later in my life started there because people were going there, and there was food. Always there was music.
Yes.
It's like stages. People were just like randomly just building up stages, and I saw Jesse Jackson there. Rest of his soul, he just passed. I saw when George Floyd's brother showed up there. Ilhan Omar was walking around, with in plain clothes one day and stuff. No one really knew who she was until someone, on the stage pointed out like, "Oh, Ilhan Omar is here" and stuff. And she was like, "Oh, I'm not trying to be, on camera and stuff." There was like a moment where it was like we were all just kind of going through that together, before they popped up that big fist and stuff right in the middle of 30th in Chicago. It was a circle, and people were just going there and just like telling their stories, and just kind of like bearing their soul. It's like I'm coming here because I'm here in solidarity with George Floyd and in his murder and stuff, but also it's like I've been through some shit, and like people were really like talking about like what kinds of like emotions and triggers and stuff like this, like seeing what happened to that man, does to us and stuff. My inspiration for a project that I did later on and stuff like happened because of a spontaneous kind of like out just a spontaneous kind of burst of like art and music, feeding folks and stuff, and it reminded me of the work and stuff I'd done with Food Not Bombs, and it was all kind of just like the mutual aid, the community assemblies, because there was always like these like community meetings and stuff where folks were kind of like, it's kind of where the demands and stuff had come from. It was 20 demands for the occupation of the George Floyd Square. It like kind of happened in the spirit of kind of what was happening in the days, just following like his murder. And and it like for like at least the first couple months it felt like everyone was a part of that. People coming from out of state, people coming from all over, and there's some weird folks, but there's some right. Like folks that were like not there for the right reasons and stuff too. And sure. It was kind of a confluence of all of that, just like what we're saying here right now. I mean, it was just, it's hard to explain. It was in the summer too, so we could all just show out at any time.
Yeah.
We were south side and outside.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like I'm noticing that like throughout your history of being involved in political activism, a lot of it, the stuff that you found the most meaningful were these spontaneous things that you didn't necessarily predict to be happening personally, but they happened in person, in a collective, in a circle with other people who are there as well. And those seemed like the times that are the most inspiring for you and the most educational. And so I'm wondering like how this plays into your interest in sound and amplifying sound, and how this has turned into your work with the People Sound.
Yeah, so like at some point, in these kind of insurgent movements, you got to get organized. You got to click up with some folks, and at the time I had clicked up with this group called the Workers' Defense Alliance, since it's now defunct now. Goes by another name, and we were organizing in that space around that community defense. So we were trying to bring resources in, books, clothing, there's this space called like the People's Closet, where people can just go and just like, it's still there, and as people just donate clothes, you can go and pick up what you need. The ideation around like that started there. There was a people's library that we had built there for books for young people in the community that maybe didn't have access to that at the time. And then later the awning under the speedway was called like the People's Way. And it was like under like the awning that we were able to kind of host like these kind of like political education nights. And you know, I was a budding DJ at the time and stuff. I mean, I had maybe 4 or 5 gigs under my belt at the time, and I was just looking for opportunities to play music, and there was at the time there was a lot of gun violence and stuff going on around there. And you know, we were trying to ideate and organize around trying to get people to put their guns down and just, you know, spend some time with each other. This was around the time Murphy Ranks was murdered, and you know, we were just trying to figure out a way to get the community engaged in something that wasn't, you know, all the trauma and the fear and anxiety and stuff that was kind of happening in that space. And so we started hosting like music nights, where we were just playing music and kind of hanging out. I was just, you know, I was playing records. I just put on a record and just all hang out and just flip the record and just kind of moving along. While people were just like doing hopscotch and eating food, and you know, and then there were other nights and stuff where we do like a film. I mean, we tried to kind of do our lefty take on it. We'd always, you know, play like films and stuff that maybe had like a some kind of political angle on there. And a community member would make us popcorn, and you know, it was just like a, you know, a blanket kind of affair, and all under the awning of the Speedway. And then and we also hosted events called Fuck 12 Fridays, and we tried to educate folks on police terror and like strategies and stuff that they use. You know, we tried to get them access to you know, cop watch training, and you know, how to safely do that in community, and so like, you know, all this is going on. I'm seeing, you know, all these talented people that I'm surrounded with, you know, and them showing up in their strengths, and I've been a part of the dance community. When I moved to Minneapolis, I was going to these parties through IntelliFunk, and I was going to these like warehouse parties, and I had, you know, it felt the feeling of like what it, you know, pro audio kind of sounds like and stuff, you know, when you're right in front of these big, you know, subwoofers, and just how impactful it is, and how it kind of really draws people in. And you know, and I'd seen a lot of these protests and stuff that we were going to, especially early on, there just really wasn't really a whole lot of like great like amplified sound for them, you know, like so like a part of what I had to bring to my comrades, my community and stuff, was like I had access to this community that, you know, was really invested in pro audio and kind of like pushing you know, music fidelity to the highest degree. And I was able to borrow some speakers and stuff from a promoter, friend of mine. His name's Steven Centrific, and he kind of helped me get my thing jumping. And so I use these speakers for all of these events I was talking about. I use them for protests, marches, rallies. We use them, you know, it wasn't until really like 2021 where we started to use them for like parties and stuff. And and it was like after like I'd done enough like actions, you know, with these speakers that like I started to kind of build like my reputation for doing this. Even before there was even a name for the People's Sound, it was just me doing it. And
just like organizing, like getting the actual equipment, bringing it on to like organizing and setting it up for like whatever trucks or whatever, right? Like that kind of.
It was from just like this angle of being like a community sound resource. You know, like we had a loop for it. We had people that were really interested in kind of DIY sound pop-ups kind of things, and there's a lot. You know, in Minneapolis, you know, we got quite a few groups that do that. They just pop up in parks and over in like streets and stuff that are closed down. You know, shout out to Headspace Collective and Wizard House. Technosferatu. And we got groups here that just like are really like about that life and pull us off. Greyforia sound. And that's always been like a part of my culture. I think what the people sound
and the culture within like house and techno, right?
Yeah, and house and techno in particular and stuff. 'Cause that's what I'm interested in like hip hop and all that. But really, this like house and techno is kind of what moves me and what I feel like kind of characterizes like the sound of what later became. So it all really culminated in like 2021. I did a fundraiser. I was able to raise like around pretty close to $8,000 from the community. This is like a year after the it had been almost a year since George Floyd was murdered at this time, and you're gonna raise this money. And then because we wanted to move it forward, we wanted to be able to keep doing these things. I didn't want to have to keep borrowing PA and stuff from these people in the community. I wanted to have our own system that was like black run. There wasn't really like a whole lot of crews, like black crews at the time that were doing sound. And so that we raised this money on March 21st, 2021. And then on May, it was the first Sunday of May in 2021, we did our first pop-up, which was in Minneapolis. It was May Day. It was the first Sunday of the year, the first Sunday of May of the year. And and it's been a tradition here kind of dating back to the 70s. In 2021, because of the pandemic, there wasn't really a whole lot of like things kind of going on at the time. I don't think anyone popped up in the park unless it was families having like a barbecue and stuff. I mean, we were still in the midst of the pandemic at the time, and not like COVID has gone anywhere and stuff. I'm just trying to say like we were at risk doing this. We pulled it off. My thought process kind of going into it was like, I had seen just like how the counterinsurgency was like impacting like my community. These people that I was rolling with in person mostly during all that. I was seeing just the toll it was kind of taking on their lives. These people were like burning out and like in these loops. They were not talking about each other well. Characterizing each other like fed jacketing and kind of characterizing each other as like not comrades and there's something about like wanting to like get them all like outside with good music, around like we had like a lot of agitprop kind of going on at the time too, so we had a bunch of like zines and stuff floating around in our community. So we had like a zine table. It was a really spicy banner that we hung up right in front of the sound system that says like there was like a sign that says like someone found a sign that says like we love our police, always did, always will, and we changed it to we hate our police, always did, always will, and stuff, and and put like some red graffiti on there, and we just we popped all that up under a pop-up and with the sound system. It was a QSC sound system, and that was like the first May Day, and we did it again the following year, and it just kind of became like a tradition and stuff. We've been doing it for this will be the 5th year now. And we started to kind of like work with community groups that had been doing May Day for decades. Truth be told, right. they needed a community sound resource and people that could kind of help amplify like their thing and stuff. So we started to help other groups that needed like the sound or those kind of connections and stuff to kind of get their thing jumping again, and in the meantime we were able to kind of keep our thing jumping too. And So there's a spirit of Mayday. It's a lot of things. It's the Southside Battle Train. It's the Heart of the Beast Theater. It's
this is like a long-standing kind of like, I don't know, hippie, lefty kind of parade that's been going on in Minneapolis every year. But then kind of
International Worker Day. There's a lot of that going on. This is another unique thing that we've built over 5 years. That's a part of it now too, is having several sound systems going in the park, and there's a beat to it. When you pull up there.
Yeah, which is new for May Day, honestly. Yeah, and that's cool. So, I mean, I want to be cognizant of your time here, but I don't know, I wonder if once again, so you went from using sound as a resistance thing, as a thing to dance to synthesizing those things into moments where there is celebration, there is bringing together of fractured community, there's agitprop, there's education, all happening at once. I guess I'm wondering how the ICE occupation has offered a continuation or a new kind of challenge to working with sound and working with people's sound, and just more generally how you see sound as being essential to the principles that you care about.
Yeah, so recently I've helped out at a workers' assembly. This is a place where that was hosted, where the CW, I don't know, this is the communication workers union here in Minneapolis. Is very militant, left kind of leaning union and stuff. It's one of the few around here, and so they have access to this space where we just organize a direct democracy response to what's happening here. At the last one that we'd organized, it's where we created a strike committee that was able to pull off the 123 strike that happened here in Minneapolis and stuff. So it was it was ice out, no shopping, no school, and now given the meeting that we just had this past weekend, we're calling for another strike. It's going to be on International Workers' Day, May 1st, in 2026 here. And, and we're calling for kind of escalating actions kind of going into it. A reason I bring that up is because I ran sound at that event. I popped up some speakers there and kind of helped amplify the voices of some of the organizers of that event. I see the sound system as a resource for these kind of times. I don't right now. I'm not really thinking about parties per se. I'm thinking more about how can we use the sound to kind of amplify the right voices at this time. We're coming up on our 5-year anniversary, so we have a venue for March 21st for an event that we're going to pop up the bigger sound system that we have, and try to keep to our values, keep it as close to free as we can, and also have an educational kind of spin on it, and some really really good fucking beats, and then May Day, and I'm also popping up the sound system at a festival called The Great Beyond. It's something that we did last year. It's something that we've committed to, and it's very notable here in Minneapolis and stuff. It's a kind of more of a techno in-house festival, and artistically and stuff. I like to do stuff like that, where it's kind of have this kind of futurism kind of vibe to it, and we're trying to push tech to to its limits. and like sound and visual art. So I'm connected with this really dope group called Balance Space Collective, to makes really cool like visual like installations and stuff. And those are some of my close friends. I'm gonna tie it all together. I think that like the sound system is a resource for the people. It is for like people during these moments and stuff that like need the right voices amplified. Folks that are more oriented towards like the working class, and folks that are more oriented towards like people like led movements and stuff. I try to use the platform to speak out against things that I find to be like not just in this world and stuff. I've been screaming for Palestine, with the sound system. We'd hosted several events just about that, to raise money to send the folks in Palestine, or to raise money for orgs around here that are fighting for Palestinians. Also in like recent years, we've done benefits and for like gender affirming care, or abortion rights, or for folks that are under duress and stuff because they can't pay their rent or something like that. We try to use the sound system for those kind of means. Or people, unfortunately, because our community is so close, like when people pass away, like in our community, we always try to celebrate them through some kind of party and stuff. And I'll be the first person to donate, the sound just for that, to celebrate them. And so there's like the spirit of just community, and the kind of community that I want to continue to grow with. It is a community that does care, that does show up for folks and stuff, and we're just oriented towards the kind of right things. I use this saying like a better world is possible often, not in like the utopian sense and stuff, but like kind of we can kind of, but like for me it's kind of like an anarchist lens that like we can kind of create a better world together based on just working together to do it. It takes a crew to pull off a sound system. I can't like do all that work by myself. I don't lift those speakers or all that by myself. So that labor is always very collectivized and stuff. And I help other people, with their thing too. I'll lift speakers for other crews, and for me it's just like a really great model for that kind of horizontal, organizing. Like we,
yeah. I mean, you're literally you got a group of people together in a circle or in a crowd that are simultaneously, or pretty much simultaneously resonating at the same time, about the same messages. You can feel it in your body. You can feel whether it's transcendental like a beat, or whether it's informational. And that's pretty it's pretty anarchist.
We know we're doing our thing right is when people are smiling, and that there's joy in the room, and that there's a sense that there is some freedom from concern, freedom from the some of the things that we kind of carry into in those experiences, and that there's some kind of release there. I'm not a big advocate for escapism or kind of creating spaces that like are not of this world and stuff. I'm very much like in the world that we're living in, and but I try to help people kind of have some reprieve as well with these experiences. And
yeah, I mean, it's this kind of stuff that like makes the world that we're living in, it can potentially enchant that world enough that it is satisfactory, that it is as as the better world, right? Yeah. I mean, I once again want to be cognizant of your time. Is there anything else that you want to shout out or direct people towards, or anything at the end of this conversation here?
Yeah. I just want to give a shout out to all the comrades out in Minneapolis that have been holding it down. I know we're tired right now. I know that, you know, there's a lot of poor information about Minneapolis out there, about some of the things that we've tried to accomplish here on the streets, not what the state is saying. And I just want to know that I'm out there with y'all, and, you know, we're doing the best we can. Shout out to the folks in other cities that are also going through this bullshit. You know, we press on, you know, we keep going. The shit isn't stopped here, and I hope it, you know, I hope there's a spirit that that you have some support from Minneapolis in your fight as well. And I hope folks reach out. You know, fuck ICE, fuck Donald Trump, fuck all the fucking pedophiles. What did it say? Like what did Trump say at the very beginning of his thing? It was like, oh, we gotta drain the swamp. The madness has gotta end or whatever. It's like, you know, we're fucking doing that right now.
Sure does.
So fuck that shit. We're gonna a better world as possible. And just hope folks feel inspired right now to fight and defy this shit.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you, D, so much for your time here and for everything you're doing in the community. I look forward to checking out some more of these sound systems, you know, in person, in the flesh. Yeah, solidarity forever, right?
I appreciate you asking me to be out here, and comrade love, man. You're doing it.
All right, until next time, everybody.